Is he mine? The Korean Mafia boss cornered the waitress after his daughter spoke her first words in 3 years. Chapter 1. The first words asterisk Jade Pavilion Restaurant, private dining room, 7:43 p.m. The Jade Pavilion was the kind of restaurant that existed in the precise overlap between legitimate luxury and criminal hospitality. The sort of place where the Wagyu was genuinely exceptional, and the private dining rooms were swept for listening devices every Tuesday. Hajo 40 occupied the corner booth with the contained stillness of a man who had learned long ago that stillness was its own form of power. Dark suit, no tie, the particular quality of attention that made everyone in a room aware of being observed without being able to identify the mechanism. He was the chairman of the Ha Syndicate, legitimate on paper, structurally complex underneath, and ruthless in the specific way that organizations built on survival rather than ideology tended to be. Across from him, his daughter, Ha Sona, age 7, sat with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes on the middle distance. She had been silent for 3 years, not deaf, not cognitively impaired, simply silent, in the way that children who have witnessed something they cannot process sometimes go silent. The doctors called it selective mutism triggered by acute trauma. Jun Seo called it the thing he could not fix, which put it in a category that contained almost nothing else. Siane's mother had died in a fire 3 years ago. Siane had been in the house. She had been found in a closet, unharmed physically, and had not spoken since the night she was carried out. Jun Seo had hired 4 specialists. He had restructured his schedule around her appointments. He had done everything that could be done with money and proximity. The silence continued. Tonight was her birthday. He had brought her to the Jade Pavilion because it had been her mother's favorite restaurant, which was either a meaningful gesture or a poor decision. He was no longer always certain which category his choices fell into. The waitress arrived with the birthday dessert, a small layered cake with a single candle, brought with the quiet professionalism that the Jade Pavilion trained into all its staff. Mina Okafor 29 set the plate down in front of Siane with care, crouched to eye level with the natural ease of someone comfortable with children, and said in a low, warm voice, "Happy birthday. I heard you like strawberries. The chef put extra." Sian looked at the cake. Then she looked at Mina. Something passed across the child's face, a recognition that had no logical source, a warmth moving through features that had been carefully neutral for 3 years. And then, in a voice that was small from disuse but clear, "Thank you." Private dining room went absolutely still. Jun Seo looked at his daughter. His daughter was looking at the waitress. The waitress had gone very still in her crouch, her eyes wide, her composure, professional, practiced, fractured open at the edges. "Sian," Jun Seo said. His voice came out differently than he intended, stripped of the control that was its usual architecture. Siane looked at her father, then back at Mina. Then, with the deliberate certainty of a child who had decided something, "She smells like my dream mama." The candle on the birthday cake burned small and steady. Jun Seo looked at the waitress. Mina Okafor was looking at the little girl with an expression that had too much in it: recognition, grief, something being held back by effort alone. "Give you a moment," she said, standing, professional surface reassembling. "No," Jun Seo said, quietly, the word of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Stay." She stayed. Chapter 2. The question he couldn't stop. Jade Pavilion private corridor. Ladder found her after the meal in the service corridor, checking the dessert station inventory with the focused industry of someone who very much wanted to be doing something other than waiting for a conversation she knew was coming. He came alone. No security in the corridor, a notable choice. "Mina Okafor," he said. She turned. "Mr. Ha. I apologize if I overstepped with your daughter." "You didn't." He studied her. "How long have you worked here?" 7 months. Before that, a pause that was too measured to be casual. "Various positions. I moved around." "Where are you from?" "My parents are Nigerian. I grew up partly in Lagos, partly in Seoul." She held his gaze with the practiced steadiness of someone who had answered questions like this before. In context, she was not volunteering. He looked at her for a moment with the assessment that had made him very difficult to lie to for 20 years. My daughter has not spoken in 3 years, he said. She spoke to you within 40 seconds. He paused. I need to understand why. Children sometimes respond to, don't give me the clinical explanation. His voice was not unkind. It was simply direct, the way a scalpel was direct. She said you smelled like her dream mama. He watched Mina's face carefully. Her mother died 3 years ago. Siane was in the house. He paused. My late wife's name was Ha-Yoona. She was Korean. She had no known connection to anyone matching your description. Another pause, but Siane recognized something. Mina was very still. I don't know your wife, she said. No, he said, but I think you knew something about her or she knew something about you. He took a single step closer, not threatening, measured. I'm going to find out what it is. I would prefer you told me yourself. She looked at him. I need to think, she said. You have until tomorrow, he said. I'll send someone with my contact information. He turned to leave, then stopped. She said, dream mama. He looked back. Siane doesn't dream. She hasn't since the fire. Her therapist documented it. A pause. Until 8 weeks ago when she started drawing a woman she called her dream person. I have the drawings. He held Mina's gaze. They look like you. He left. Mina stood in the service corridor with her hands braced on the dessert station and breathed carefully through something that had been building for 7 months and had just broken the surface. Chapter 3. The DNA and the fire **hint. Ha residence study. The following evening she came. Jun Sia had half expected she wouldn't, that she would calculate the risk and disappear, which would itself have been informative. She arrived at the residence at 7 p.m. with the bearing of someone who had made a decision overnight and had committed to it completely. He had also, overnight, done what he did with all problems that required clarity. He had gathered information. He placed the folder on the desk between them. 7 years ago, he said, my wife underwent what she told me was a medical procedure in Busan. I was in Tokyo for 3 weeks. She told me it was routine. He opened the folder. It wasn't. I've spent the last 18 hours looking at records that were very well hidden. He looked at Mina. She used a surrogate. Mina's hands were folded in her lap. Her expression was the most controlled he had seen it. She told me the surrogate pregnancy didn't take, he continued. There was a document, a medical notification of failed implantation. I saw it at the time and accepted it. He paused. It was falsified. How do you know? Mina said. He placed a second document on the desk. A DNA analysis report dated 48 hours ago. He had taken a hair sample from Siane's brush and compared it against a genetic profile built from publicly available data, a research participant registration Mina had filed 6 years ago under her full legal name. A partial match, he said. Not conclusive on its own, but enough to justify a direct test. He slid the report toward her. I'm asking you to take one today, here, with my physician. Silence. You already know what it will say, he said. Mina looked at the report, then at him. Yes, she said quietly. I do, int. Ha residence medical room. 1 hour later, the results confirmed what the partial match had suggested. Mina Akafer was Siane's biological mother. They sat with that in the study afterward, the document on the desk between them. She told me I had miscarried, Mina said. Her voice was steady in the way of someone who had processed this grief a long time ago and was now simply narrating the archaeology of it. I was 22. I needed money for my brother's medical treatment. I responded to a private medical study advertisement, compensation for surrogacy participation. I didn't know who the commissioning family was. I was told the pregnancy had not taken at the 8-week mark. She paused. They paid me. I left. I spent years believing. She stopped. Yuna told me she had a miscarriage, Junseo said. The same week, a different story for the same event. He looked at the DNA report. She was protecting something. I don't know if she was protecting herself or protecting Siane or he stopped. I don't know yet. Fire, Mina said carefully. He looked at her. Siane was in the house. Your wife died. Siane survived. She paused. I have been in Seoul for 7 months because I received an anonymous letter. It said, your child is alive and in danger. Come to Seoul. It had an address, the Jade Pavilion, with a start date for a position that had been arranged for me. She held his gaze. Someone wanted me here near her, someone who knew the truth. Junseo was very still. Yuna, he said. That was my conclusion, Mina said. She arranged it before she died. She was trying to repair something. A pause. Or she was afraid of something and she was creating a contingency. Jun Seo said. He stood, went to his safe, and produced a sealed envelope. His name in Yuna's handwriting. He had found it in her personal files 3 years ago and had not opened it, in the way of a man who was not ready to know what it contained. He placed it on the desk. He opened it. Chapter 4. The Underboss and the Truthint. Ha Residence Study. Continuous. Yuna's letter was 4 pages, handwritten, dated 6 weeks before the fire. She had known about the surrogacy from the beginning, had arranged it, had chosen Mina specifically from a curated list, had then in the months after Siane's birth been consumed by guilt at what she had done. But the letter was not primarily about guilt. It was a warning. Jun Seo. I have discovered that Park Hyunjae knows. He has known since the beginning. He arranged the falsification of the failed implantation record. He kept the documentation as leverage. I do not know what he intends to use it for. I believe he is waiting for the right moment. I'm afraid of what that moment looks like. If something happens to me, please find the girl. Her name is Mina Akafer. She is kind and she doesn't know what she lost. I am sorry for everything. Please keep Siane safe. Park Hyun-yi. Jun Seo set the letter down. Hyun-yi was his underboss, his second in command for 11 years. The man who had been at his right hand through every expansion, every consolidation, every crisis. The man who had been at Yuna's funeral, head bowed, hand on Jun Seo's shoulder. You know that name? Mina asked. Yes. His voice had gone entirely flat. He orchestrated the surrogacy documentation, she said, which means he had leverage over your wife and over the surrogate's identity. She paused. If the fire was not an accident. Jun Seo finished the sentence that had lived in the back of his mind for 3 years, unexamined because examining it required him to identify the person responsible, and he had not been ready to find that person inside his own organization. He was ready now. He's been in my organization for 11 years, he said, with a quietness that was its own kind of danger. He's been managing your exposure for 11 years, Mina said carefully. As long as the surrogacy remained secret, he controlled what happened to it. When your wife threatened to reveal it, she didn't finish. Jun Seo stood. His phone was in his hand. Wait, Mina said. He looked at her. If you move on him directly, he has contingencies. Men like that always do. She held his gaze with the focused clarity of someone who had spent 7 months preparing for this conversation. I've spent 7 months documenting his external contacts. I have communication records, financial transfers, and testimony from the doctor who falsified the implantation records. I found him 4 months ago. A pause. I was waiting until I had enough to make it permanent. Jun Seo looked at her. You came here to take him down, he said. I came here to protect my daughter, she said. Taking him down is what protection requires. Chapter 5. The Contract and the Chemistryint. Ha Residence Living Room. 2 days later, Hyun-yi did not yet know that the letter existed or that the doctor had been found. He was operating on the assumption that his position was secure, which made him, for a narrow window, manageable. But Mina was exposed. She was a restaurant waitress with no formal protection, and now that she had met with Jun Seo and the meeting had been observed by Hyun-yi's people, he had eyes in the residence. A fact Jun Seo had discovered in the last 48 hours with cold fury. She was a liability that Hyun-yi would move to neutralize. I'm offering you legal protection, Jun Seo said. Formal status within the household. Hyun-yi's people cannot touch you if you are officially part of this family. Mina looked at him from across the room with the expression of someone parsing subtext. How formal. A marriage of legal convenience. On paper, documented, unambiguous. It gives you status, security, and access to legal frameworks that would make any move against you politically complicated for anyone inside or outside my organization. He paused. It is not, I am not asking for anything beyond the practical arrangement. Siane, Mina said, you would live here. As her, he paused, searched for the right word. As her family, Mina was quiet. She spoke to me, she said, as if reminding herself of something. For the first time in 3 years, she's been drawing me. She knows something she can't articulate. Mina looked at her hands. Children sometimes do. Some biological attunement that she stopped. I've thought about her every day for 7 years. I thought she was a miscarriage. I spent years grieving something I didn't know was actually. She steadied herself. Yes, she said. I'll sign the contract. Junseo nodded, professional, contained. One condition, Mina said, name it. You don't manage me. I'm not a variable to be handled. We work on Hyun-yi together with full information sharing, and when it's done, I have equal say in what happens to the documentation. She held his gaze. I didn't come here to be protected. I came here to finish something. He looked at her for a moment. Agreed, he said. They signed the contract at the residence desk at 9 p.m. with 2 attorneys present. Siane, who had been allowed to stay up, watched from the doorway with the focused attention she gave to most things, and then came and sat beside Mina on the sofa with the casual certainty of someone who had decided this was where she belonged. Junseo watched his daughter lean against Mina's arm. Something shifted in the architecture of his face. Chapter 6. What Hyunjae new and WHNINT. Separate location, confrontation with Dr. Song, the following MORNINGDR. Song Min-tae had spent 3 years believing he was insulated by distance. He had moved his practice to Incheon, changed his clinic name, and operated on the reasonable assumption that the people who had paid him to falsify records were too invested in their own concealment to surface the evidence. He was wrong on all counts. Mina had found him 4 months ago through a chain of medical licensing records and a name from the original surrogacy contract that she had memorized and never stopped tracking. She had not approached him until now because she had needed Junseo's authority to make the confrontation stick. They sat across from Song in his clinic's private office, Junseo on one side, Mina on the other, and placed the documentation on the table between them. Song looked at it, then at Junseo, then at Mina, then at the document again. Hyun-yi approached me 11 years ago, Song said. He had the voice of a man who had been waiting to say something for a long time and had reached the point where the relief of saying it outweighed the consequences. He told me the chairman's wife wanted a surrogate. He told me the chairman was not to know. He told me afterward that the birth was to be documented as a failed implantation, and the surrogate was to receive compensation and a fabricated miscarriage notification, Junseo said. He said the chairman's wife was acting outside her authority. That the child, if born from a surrogate, would be, his word was complicated, that he was protecting the organization's succession structure. Song paused. I believed him. He was the underboss. When Yuna died, Song looked down. He called me the week after the funeral. He said the file was permanently closed. He said if I ever discussed it, the medical board investigation he had been holding in reserve would surface. A pause. He had manufactured a complaint against me. It had enough detail to be damaging even if ultimately disproved. He's been holding you for 3 years, Mina said. Yes. Will you testify? He looked at her. To whom? The Joint Financial Crimes Unit, Junseo said. A framework that is currently building a case against Hyun-yi's external operations. Your testimony closes the domestic side of it. He paused. In exchange, the manufactured complaint is buried and your cooperation is noted. Song was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. I'll testify. Chapter 7. The Gala and the MISTAKEIRON Lily Gala, Grand Seoul Hotel. 3 weeks later, the Iron Lily was the Ha Syndicate's annual charitable gala, a function that existed at the precise intersection of social legitimacy and organizational display. 300 guests, international press. The kind of event where the organization's legitimate face was at its most polished. Hyun-yi had requested to attend. Junseo had said yes. This was the trap. What Hyun-yi did not know, the testimony had been delivered. The Joint Financial Crimes Unit had, as of that morning, enough to move. The gala was the controlled environment in which Hyun-yi would be informed of his position and given the opportunity to cooperate or not. Junseo's legal team was present. 2 framework investigators were present as catering staff. What Junseo did not fully account for. Hyun-yi had been in the organization for 11 years and had not survived that long without developing contingencies for the moment his primary asset, the chairman's trust, was revoked. Mina was in the gala because Junseo's wife attended the Iron Lily. She wore a dark gold dress and stayed near the center of the room where she was visible, and where Jun Seo's personal security could maintain sight lines. Siane was not there. She was home with her therapist safe. At 9:17 p.m., Mina's phone buzzed, a message from the residence. From Siane's therapist, * 2 men at the front gate. They said the chairman sent them to collect Siane. I have not let them in. Please advise * Mina read it once. Then she walked directly to Jun Seo. He read it. His face did not change, but his eyes went to Hyun-yi across the room, who was at that moment checking his own phone. Their eyes met. Hyun-yi understood in that single exchange that the containment had failed. What happened in the next 6 minutes was fast and controlled on the surface and extremely dangerous underneath. Hyun-yi moved toward the exit. Jun Seo's security closed the perimeter. Mina was already on the phone to the residents. Lock the gate, call the police, don't open the door for anyone, while simultaneously moving toward the gala's service exit because she was not waiting for anyone to bring her information secondhand. Jun Seo caught her arm at the service door. My car, he said. Faster. They went Ha residence. 9:38 p.m. The 2 men at the gate were Hyun-yi's, dispatched as a contingency the moment Hyun-yi had received word, 2 hours earlier, that Song had testified. They had not yet breached the gate. The therapist had locked down correctly, and the police response had been fast. Jun Seo's vehicle arrived 40 seconds after the police did. Hyun-yi, who had been detained at the gala by the framework investigators in the controlled operation that had proceeded without the complication of his contingency move, was in custody before 10 p.m. The 2 men at the gate were detained. Jun Seo stood at the residence entrance and looked at the gate, secured, undamaged, everyone inside safe, with the specific stillness of a man absorbing the distance between what happened and what could have happened. Mina was already inside. He found her in Siane's room. Siane had been awake. She was now in Mina's arms on the window seat, not crying. She had not cried, the therapist said, simply asked where Mina was when she heard the noise at the gate. When told Mina was coming, she had sat down and waited. Jun Seo stood in the doorway. Siane looked up at him. Then she reached out one hand in his direction. He crossed the room and sat beside them both. The 3 of them in the window seat, the city below doing its indifferent night business, the gate locked and the house quiet. Chapter 8. What the silence BCAMERSIDNCE. Garden. 3 months later, morning. The garden was Siane's project. She had started it 6 weeks after the gala, when the therapist had suggested that growing things was good for children who were learning to trust the world again. Siane had taken this advice with the seriousness she brought to everything, and had proceeded to redesign a significant portion of the East Garden with the focused authority of someone who had opinions about where tomatoes should go. Mina knelt beside her at the planting bed, handing over seedlings as directed. Siane had not returned to silence. She had not become suddenly, extravagantly verbal either. She was still measured, still selective, still the child who used words as if they were a finite resource. But she used them, every day. More of them gradually, like a door opening incrementally rather than all at once. Here, she said, pointing to the space beside the existing tomato plant. The basil goes here, they help each other. Companion planting, Mina said. Yes. Siane accepted a seedling. My teacher said that some plants are like family. They grow better when they're next to the right ones. Mina planted the seedling with careful hands. That makes sense to you, she asked. Siane considered this with the gravity of a 7-year-old approaching a philosophical question. Yes, she said, because I grew better when you came. Garden was quiet for a moment. Mina said carefully. Know you're my birth mama, Siane said. She said it with the matter-of-fact clarity of a child who had arrived at this understanding through her own reasoning and had decided it was not complicated. And Mama Yuna was my other mama. I have 2. She put the seedling in the ground with small, deliberate hands. That's more than most people. Mina looked at her. Yes, she said. That's more than most people. Patted the soil down firmly. Papa told me the truth last week. He said you were always my family. You just couldn't find us for a while. She looked up. He said it was his job to make sure you could always find us now. Residence, study. Later that morning, Jun Seo was at his desk, working through the restructuring documentation that had occupied him for 3 months, the legitimate dissolution and reorganization of the Haas Syndicate's non-legitimate operations, a process that was complicated, expensive, and necessary. He had engaged a legal architecture firm, 3 financial advisors, and a compliance consultant who asked very good questions without volunteering opinions. Mina came in without knocking. She had stopped knocking about 6 weeks ago, and he had noticed and said nothing because the not knocking was its own kind of information. She set a cup of coffee on his desk. He looked at it, then at her. "Sion, told me you explained things to her last week," she said. "Yes, that was the right thing to do. I know." He paused. "She asked me directly. She had been asking indirectly for 2 months, and I had been—" He paused, managing it. She pointed that out. Mina's expression moved in something that was almost a smile. "She told you. Is very direct for 7. He looked at his coffee. "She gets it from somewhere." A pause. "Contract," Mina said. He looked up. "It was 3 months," she said. "The original terms were for the duration of the immediate threat." She held his gaze. "The threat has been resolved. Hyun-yi is in pretrial detention. The testimony is on record. The documentation is placed." She paused. "You don't need the legal arrangement anymore." He was quiet. "Sion needs it," he said. "Sion and I have a relationship that exists outside a legal document." She tilted her head. "You know that." He was quiet for a longer moment. "And what do I need?" he said. The question came out more directly than he had intended, which was itself information. Mina looked at him with the clear-eyed assessment that had been the thing about her. From the beginning, she saw clearly, and she said what she saw. "Think you know the answer to that," she said. "I think you've known for about 8 weeks. I think you are currently deciding whether to say it like a man who controls everything or like a man who is willing to be surprised." He looked at her. "Contract," he said after a moment. "Would like to renegotiate the terms." She waited. "Permanently," he said. "Without the asterisk convenience qualifier." He paused. "If you're willing." She looked at him for a long moment with Sione's seriousness and something warmer underneath it. "Consider the terms," she said. She picked up her coffee cup from the corner of his desk. She had brought 2, he noticed now, and sat across from him. Outside, through the study window, Sione was still in the garden. She had moved on from the basil and was now consulting with the groundskeeper about the empty bed along the south wall, pointing and explaining with the authority of someone who had decided what went there and needed the infrastructure to agree. "She wants sunflowers along the south wall," Mina said, following his gaze. "She said the house needs more yellow. She's 7. Her design instincts are entirely her own." A pause. "I think she's right, actually." He looked at the empty south bed. At his daughter negotiating with the groundskeeper with composed determination. At the garden that had been unattended and was now, incrementally, becoming something. "She'll need someone to help plant them," he said. "Yes." Mina looked at him over her coffee. "She will." The groundskeeper was already nodding. Siane had apparently won the sunflower argument. She turned back toward the house and spotted them both through the study window, her father at the desk, Mina in the chair across from him, and her face did the thing it had started doing recently, the thing the therapist called integration, and the thing Jun-seo called the best thing he had seen in 3 years. It settled. Completely. The held-breath quality that had been in her since the fire releasing, incrementally, into the specific ease of a child who has located the people she belongs with and verified that they are staying. She waved once, turned back to the garden. Jun-seo looked at the space across the desk where Mina sat with her coffee and her clear eyes and the permanent quality of a person who had arrived and decided. Some doors, once opened, did not close. Some silences, once broken, became something better than sound. Ndeni xtplease subscribe.